Hello everyone, we're here in the first International Identitarian Congress. We're here with Mr. Ernst Zündel. So we're glad to have you here, Ernst, and we'd like to ask you some questions.
Very good.
Ernst, the first thing I want to ask you, all your audience wants to know, is you can give further explanations about what actually is the Leutcher report.
I was on trial in Canada for false news, and it was a law from the 12th century, 1275, over 800 years old. They put me on trial because of my viewpoint on history. And since I did not believe what transpired inside German camps, they were saying that I was spreading false news, and I could have gotten up to 5 years imprisonment. And this is a criminal charge. And since I was an immigrant to Canada, if I had been given 6 months, more than 6 months, yes, then I was automatically to be deported back to Germany. So this this trial was very important for me because it meant my life, my career, everything would have ended if I had been convicted. And so the trial proceeded. I engaged an American prison director to talk about the gassing of people because he had a permit to kill people by gas chamber operator. And there's a protocol, they call that, of 32 or 34 points that the man who is in charge of an execution by gas had to follow. For instance, if there was a guard on the outside of the perimeter of the prison, they had to be called down, because the gas coming out of the gas chamber would have killed them. And there's a newspaper story from San Francisco. It's called The Dead Pigeons of San Quentin. And when they gassed people in San Quentin, invariably the pigeons were gassed and fell down from underground. So anyways, it's a very dangerous procedure. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is it is not like in Hollywood. You know, the way we see in Hollywood, the way these castings took place, totally at variance to what happens in reality.
Because there weren't like 100 people in a same room gassed and killed.
Actually, more than that.
More than that.
900, 1,000. Yeah, so it was, in a way, grotesque. And the Leutcher report came into being because for the court, I wanted to illustrate to the court in Canada what the reality of this was, what the scientific reality was. And so Fred Leutcher was building and designing gas chambers and electric chairs in the United States. That was his profession. Macabre, but it was his profession. And so Fred, this prison director Armentrout told me that his technician was Fred Leutcher, and why didn't I contact him? And so I took the name down, the address down, we contacted him. Eventually, he agreed to go to Poland and look at these actual facilities.
Like an undercover?
Yeah, well, in those days, there was a communist government in Poland.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it was very dangerous. And of course, I couldn't go and write to the Polish government, we want to examine your gas chambers.
Of course.
So they would have stopped us at the border. And so they went underground. In separate planes, they went to Warsaw and then they reassembled and then they went to these camps. Now, the idea for doing that was to elevate this story that circulated about German guilt and German methods of extermination and so on. I wanted to elevate it out of the realm of words or photos or books. I wanted to have physical scientific evidence, and the Leutcher report is the first examination, the first forensic examination, the way a detective or a police department would do if there is one murder. Had never been done before.
So the first serious attempt to get the truth, right, was the Leutcher.
What's the Leutcher report? To get scientifically, not, you know, a writer in a book, he can distort the story. A witness can lie, and the lie is reported as truth. But I tried to elevate and to remove from what we say in English is he said, she said, they said. I wanted to remove it from that realm and bring it up to the level of a forensic examination by scientific methods, meaning examining, for instance, rock samples, bricks, the effluents of toilets and so on, examining all that in a laboratory, not in communist Poland, but so they had to smuggle this out into America and then examining a very famous laboratory in America. And the idea for an American laboratory was to be neutral, because I didn't want to have a German laboratory. So that basically was the idea, and they did that in secret. They took all these samples, they painted, measured, examined. Fred Leutcher was an expert in America in execution, and so we applied American standard to German facilities in Poland. And so I had lots of pictures in that report, and we had a draftsman, an architectural draftsman, and Fred and this draftsman measured every door, every window, the height of the rooms, the drains and so on, just the way a detective would make when he was investigating a crime scene. So what you're looking at in a Leutcher report is the first forensic examination of these facilities by neutrals.
And what is the conclusion? What was the conclusion of this report?
So Fred came to Toronto. He submitted a report over 200 pages in about that size, thick report, with statistics, with his drawings, with his photographs that he himself took. And I was convicted. So he submitted it. The court didn't believe it, and I was convicted. But after 9.5 years of going through the courts in Canada, I won my case in the highest court of Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada, not under technicality. The Supreme Court did not rule saying, oh, that Fred Leutcher, boy, he's quite a smart fellow, and we let Zündel go because he's a smart fellow and he did this. No, they did what courts frequently do. They said, in Canada, a member of a minority. As a German, I was a member of a minority. As a revisionist who didn't believe in the Orthodox history, I was a minority. The majority believed it. Ernst was a minority by not believing it. And so the Supreme Court ruled in a very, very long judgment. It was 140 pages. And it said, a member of Canadian society is protected to tell all the things that he wants to tell without looking over his shoulders constantly for censors. So Ernst Zündel is a German, a member of a minority intellectually, and he must be free to tell his history the way he sees it, because the Canadian Constitution protects this right. It protects the right to be wrong. And so the Supreme Court said, the message, the content of what I said, or what the individual says in other cases, is immaterial. They did not judge me on the material. They judged me on the principle that I must have the right to tell the truth.
But the Leutcher exam has nothing to do of your liberation there, right?
Well, not really.
They ignore it.
No, they mention it in passing, but the reason for me being freed after 9.5 years was philosophical, in that they said a minority must not have to fear censorship and persecution. A minority must be able to tell its own version of history. So the Leutcher report was peripheral to the case, but I was freed on the principle.
I see. And what is the participation of David Irving in all this case?
David Irving was writing a book. He was in Key West, Florida, and David Irving and I had said that he had told me if I ran into trouble, he was going to help me in court as an expert witness. And so when I sent Leutcher to Poland, I never told anybody, never even told the rest of my staff.
Just in case.
Tell my friends. Well, because I didn't want Polish communist guards waiting at the border. And so I waited till Fred Leutcher was back in America, and I'm going to come to the story of the drama of this, how Leutcher got into Poland and out of Poland. But anyways, when he was back in America, he called me and he said, we have the report, we have all the samples, we have submitted them to the laboratory, and the results are very good for the Germans. And so David Irving said, I am coming. So he kept his promise that he would come to testify. But I got ahead of myself because here they are in Poland. And there's communist soldiers, policemen, guards at the airport, everywhere. And also, and of course, in the towns. And they had rented cars. And they were going through 3 different concentration camps. And taking these measurements, taking the photographs, taking the samples, which they were then going to take back to the United States. And during the time that they were there, the boy, the son of Mrs. Leutcher, who went along on that trip, was killed in an American Air Force base.
Leutcher's son?
Of Mrs. Leutcher's son. Yeah. And so the American Army called me in Toronto and said, Mr. Zündel, there has been a tragic accident. Mrs. Leutcher's son has been killed, and we need to notify her. And I guessed if they notified Mrs. Leutcher, she'll pack everything up and come back to the United States. That's what I thought. And so I decided to stall, to say to, and I consulted my lawyer, what do you think, Doc Christie? Well, do I tell the lady? Do I not tell the lady? My chief witnesses, Dr. Forrest's own advisors, they all said, you have to tell her. And you can't, the kid is dead, you have to tell, it's your duty, your moral duty. And I slept overnight, prayed on it, and then I said the next morning, well, I am not going to tell her. Because before history, this is a one-time chance that we get at the substance of what is going on there. And so I didn't tell her. The bereavement officer called me from the United States Army. This accident had happened. I didn't give a straight answer. So what does he do? He calls Fred Leutcher's 80-year-old mother. And I had told Fred not to tell anybody, but he told his 83-year-old mother. And so she talks to the American officer, tells him, yeah, my son is in Auschwitz, my son is in Kelno, and he's looking at these gas chambers there, and all the secret that I had wanted to keep so carefully, the old Oma, the old lady of 83, tells this American officer. And so the reason why that man never called me back is he had gotten the information. And so I was thinking everything is hunky-dory over there in Poland, not realizing that this American officer contacted the State Department in Washington. The State Department contacted the Polish embassy in Washington. Polish embassy in Washington contacted the government in Warsaw. The government in Warsaw contacted Polish state radio, and they broadcast this information that I wanted to keep so carefully, broadcasted all over the radio in Poland. And Fred Leutcher, his wife, and my friends were hammering away, chiseling away for the samples from the walls and the drains from these alleged gas chambers. 2 officers of the Polish security forces looking like SS men. They had the same uniforms, the same caps, black, long, tall boots, and it was in February. And so my team saw these, what looked like SS men, coming across the concentration camp and coming towards the gas chamber. And they thought, oh, now they had found us out. Our hammering was recognized, and they're going to arrest us now. And so they hid their things quickly in their bags, and the Polish officers didn't care about the bag. So they only said there has been a tragic accident in America, and the Polish government is asking us to escort you to Warsaw to the airport. Now, we had great difficulty in figuring out how to get these samples out of Poland, because out of Poland was like going out of Israel. They always inspected your luggage going out. In America, they do it coming in those days. And so here we were stuck 134 samples, bags full of bricks and cement pieces and dirt and so on. These were that they were going to take to the laboratory in America.
How many bags? 2?
130.
130 bags?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was luggage. And of course he had taken along a hammer, chisels, flashlights, because he had to go into underground facilities and so on. And we really didn't know how they were going to get out. And I had supplied them with silk stockings, calculators, and all kinds of chewing gum, tobacco, lipstick that they could use to bribe,
the officers,
prison guards or Polish police or something. We didn't need anything. Here's what happened. Mrs. Leutcher, in that facility, said to these 2 policemen after speaking with Fred, "He's my son. He's dead already. He's in a refrigerator in the airbase in Oklahoma. Whether I come home a week earlier or a day later, it makes no difference." So she said to Fred, "This is an important mission. Maybe nobody can ever come back here again. And so I, the mother of this dead boy, decide we will stay, we will finish the mission." And so she, with a translator, we had a translator along, said to these 2 policemen, "The mother has decided we are not coming with you now, but if you come tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock to the hotel, then we'll come with you." 11 o'clock in the morning, the 2 cops, motorcycle cops came, and a whole column of police cars. Red lights flashing, blue lights flashing, sirens wailing. They drove all the way from the middle of Poland, clear through Poland, with all this stuff in those bags, and they ended up at Warsaw Airport. Our problem was the control at Warsaw Airport, and because so many policemen with blue lights and everything came, I don't know what the order was to them.
They didn't check it.
They stood all there, dozens of policemen saluting as Fred and his samples walked towards the counter. They never checked his luggage at the counter.
Not even one?
Not even once. They just cursorily looked at the passport, all saluted, all these policemen, military people, all the way up the steps of the Polish airline that flew them out of Poland to New York. So all our worries were for nothing. But it was like miraculous.
It was a miracle, yeah. Providence.
And now the story ends in this way. I introduce it in Canada to the court. Fred introduces his report. He's interviewed for 2 days, interrogated by the judge and by the prosecutor. And the Toronto police then confiscated the samples. And they're still in police custody. As you and I speak here in Mexico, 30 years later, they're still in custody at the Toronto Police or Forensic Chamber. So
they never released that evidence?
No, because they said to me, Zündel, this was stolen. This was stolen goods. We cannot release it to you.
A piece of brick is stolen good.
But no, can you imagine? So that's the story of the Leutcher report.
Wow, it's unbelievable.
And they were hardly, of course, introduced in court. That friends who were witnesses there and myself, we had translated all these things. And within months, the Leutcher report was out in 7, 8 languages worldwide.
So it spread all over the world.
Today, I mean, there is not a website that talks about history and the forbidden history where the Leutcher report doesn't figure.
And you can actually read it online, right? It's available online.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and did you have, I heard you have a lot of problems because you wanted to tell the truth, right? About some facts.
Well, I would have to say, I was charged for a booklet for false news of 30,000 words, 30 pages. And that booklet was called, Did 6 Million Really Die?
Yes.
And it was translated, when I first received it, was already in some 15 languages. And since then, it's in dozens and dozens of languages already. But that booklet became the kind of publication of destiny in my life, because it meant I had to constantly focus on World War II. And I'm an artist by profession, and I would not ever have concentrated my mind for so long on one macabre topic, because whatever wrong was done, or how many people got killed, in whichever way, I could not bring one person alive, German, Polish, Jewish. So I always say this is a macabre issue.
Yes, it is.
And I wanted to put an end to the macabre issue. I wanted to actually end it by having a forensic examination. Let the truth come out what the truth was. For me, fortunately, the truth was favorable. But I would have lived with, I wouldn't have disputed the science. I wanted to have a scientific proof. I didn't want to have a propaganda proof by some writer or some lying witnesses.
Wow. And I hear you have a lot of people trying to kill you, burning your house, protests outside your house, very violent reaction, right? Can you tell us about it?
Well,
I have seen some pictures of protesters.
Yeah. I will show you at the end of the thing. Okay. I'll show you some pictures there. The prosecution goes this way in for political cases. They first ignore you, and then they ridicule you, and then they persecute you. And if you don't give in after all those, then they prosecute you. And mostly you end in jail. So all these things were tried for me, and I withstood the bombs, the fires, the beatings, the demonstrations, because I was convinced that I had a mission to do what I was doing. I wanted to end the speculation and the hatred, and I wanted to be the person to do it because I had enough confidence in myself, and I had talents. I could speak, I could broadcast, I could make drawings, I could mobilize people for demonstrations, and in a way, all in one package. And because I didn't drink alcohol and didn't take dope and was a very serious and sober person, it helped me steer this issue to the end, to this thing. And so the fires were terror. You cannot say anything else, but this was terror. And it was not nice, it was dangerous. And they destroyed 6,000 books in my library, 30 years of research into these issues, 60 or 70 unpublished manuscripts for books that I wanted to wait till I had won my case. And of course, destroyed. One copier alone was $29,000, was a Canon copier, and I had 6 or 7 copiers in my house. So the damage came into, the police estimated $480,000.
Wow. You're a real victim of intolerance, right?
Well, you could say that.
And you're a very brave man, you and your wife too, it seems.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me ask you, what is your relation with, or what was, or still is your relation with David Irving in this whole story?
David Irving came to the court when Leutcher came back from Poland. And David Irving had been, like all of us were, we all believed in the Holocaust. I mean, not one of my witnesses, including myself, we all believed it. Because we had seen it on the TV and seen it in books and
movies and stuff.
Movies and the works. And so David Irving had written, he was the author of over 40 books on history. And in one particular book, he had written that 77 Nazis, leading Nazis, had their hands in the Holocaust. And during the trial, during the proceedings, the prosecutor always brought out this fact that David Irving doesn't question it, always saying, so why do you question it? Here's this famous historian that's written so many books. He says 77 German government officials believed in it. Why do you not believe in it? So this was his trump card. But he had not known that I had sent this team to Auschwitz, and that when David Irving saw the results, he changed his mind. And so he then testified in court, prosecutor saying, but you said in this book that they knew, and they did this and they did that. And so David Irving said, I am human, like everybody else. I saw the films, I read the books, I saw the newspaper articles, I heard the witnesses speak, and so I believed. He said, but believing and knowing are two different things.
Wow, what an honest man, right? That's not that common.
I mean, and you know, he repudiated his own book, hand on the Bible, in the courtroom in Toronto, and knew that he was going to desperately damage his career.
Because actually, I mean, at that time, he was already a well-known author all over the world, right? Like bestseller.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said to me on that day, Zündel, my agent in New York is negotiating with a Jewish publishing house for the reprinting or the publishing of one of my books, and this could potentially bring me $1,500,000. If this agent finds out that I'm testifying in Toronto the way I am testifying in Toronto, I could well lose that contract.
And he actually did, right?
Yeah, so for us, it's easy to state something, but for him, over $1 million was riding on it. So that's double courage.
That's right. He was really tested, right?
Yeah.
Well, did you become?
And he was persecuted, as you know.
Yeah.
Poor David Irving.
In Austria, right?
He was done jailed in Austria, cancelled from Australia, barred from Canada, barred from the United States for 10 years or something. He suffered terribly because of his role.
Well, you're two are real heroes, right? Because a lot of people write a lot of good books, but I mean, you actually have suffered a lot of consequences, and you still think the same, right? I mean, you haven't changed your thoughts, so I think that makes that an example for all the people and the young men around the world.
You see, I cannot publicly state into these cameras here what I think now. My thoughts are my own. And David Irving also has paid the consequences, and he's no longer, I say nothing. He says something in order to keep be able to sell books. But the price for both of us, well, terrible.
Wow. Well, Mr. Zündel, is there anything else you want to say?
I'm going to share with you some photos.
Please.
That you can add to the film. And what I want to say to your audience is, principles are important. They're not just words. And honor is important. Not just my honor, but the honor of a people. And I did that not for my honor. It brought me nothing but persecution, problems, bombs, fires, but for the German people, especially the dead Germans that could no longer defend themselves. I became their spokesman. I became their protector. And I think it is important in the march of generations that one generation protects the other generation, and the German World War II soldiers generation protected the land of Germany where I was growing up so that I have a chance to grow up. So I owe these soldiers, men and women who were in the German armed forces, I owed them this debt. It was a debt of honor. And I'm very proud that I was able to clear their name by sending Leutcher to the podium.
Thank you so much. And Zündel, last question, if I can. Do you have any advice for these new generations that maybe, I don't know if you agree, but a lot of people is maybe awakening, right, from this whole propaganda? I don't know, would you agree with that? Maybe people is getting more aware of this propaganda, or?
Absolutely. The internet is ultimately our great savior. And when my wife and I started the Zündel site, it was the democratization of information through the internet, because suddenly on a small screen, IBM, CBS, CNN, their screen was no bigger than my screen.
That's right.
And so that was the democratization, and it ended up in every living room, at every university student the world over. My wife gets all kinds of letters from all around the world about texts that are on the internet.
So whoever wants to know the truth, they can find the truth if they have the will.
They can certainly inform themselves about the facts, and then can decide, what they feel the truth is. I must be careful by what I say, not that I talk myself into another prison term.
No, of course we don't want that.
Damaged my car, my big American car.
When was this?
It was in Toronto, Canada.
1981.
It was 1984.
84. That was the first attempt against your life.
With bombs.
With bombs, yeah.
And this here is a demonstration of my enemies. You can see here the Jewish star.
Okay, so, here's the
This is the first bomb explosion.
First bomb. This is a protest.
These are protests
your
outside
house.
my house.
How many people were there?
Up to 5,000.
5,000 people insulting.
They started sometimes 1,000, 2,000, but 5,000 people was the greatest number. And so the Toronto police very kindly dispatched special police force, and they were units of 100, and so they would dispatch 100 or 200 policemen. This unit with the white helmets always carried fire extinguishers because they had thrown Molotov cocktails against my house. So this is a special unit of the Toronto police, and these demonstrators that you saw in the other photographs. And then I wanted to protect my building, and I had put this big, strong fence around, and the Toronto city officials made me cut it in half because it was not permitted to have a 2-meter tall fence in Toronto. And when my house was burned by an arsonist, it was very easy for him to climb across the fence because it had been cut to half.
So these were not peaceful demonstrators, right?
No, they shouted, "We want Zündel, we want Zündel, how do we want Zündel?" And then they all in unison said, "We want Zündel dead."
Dead.
So they were not peaceful.
Wow.
Yeah. And now, this is about the struggle. This one here, these photos we can use for something else.
Okay, then we can edit that. And there is a front. I mean, you were in the front page of a lot of important papers.
Yeah, there were a lot of newspapers coverage about my trial. Here, you can just fold them open like that,
Yes.
and then we can scan them later.
This is the front page. No, this is not the front.
No, this is one of the pages.
One of the pages, a long article.
This is me, and this is my cameraman and bodyguard.
What paper is this? The name of the paper is the Toronto
This is. Let me just see here. That's the Globe and Mail.
Globe and Mail.
Yeah, this is like a business newspaper.
Wow, this is the first one.
So this is the bottom part of the newspaper, and this is the top part of the newspaper.
Can people find these on the internet? Or they have to go to the archive. So it's available on the internet.
Well, as long as you go on. See, this is the Globe and Mail. That's March. Yeah, March
1985.
1985.
Prosecution Zündel trial faced long odds.
And why this is important is the first time in history that this photograph was published. It is of a swimming pool inside the concentration camp of Auschwitz. Because if you look here this way, you see, this is inside. That indicates that it's inside. It was a large Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Inside Auschwitz.
Inside the concentration.
And I heard as well that there were some music bands in there too, right?
Music bands, yeah, sculpture classes. And now this is the Toronto Star front page.
Okay, we show it. Front page of Toronto Star.
The circulation of that newspaper is 700,000.
Wow.
It's the largest newspaper in Canada.
March 1st, 1985.
Yeah, March 1st, 85. And you can see this was after I was convicted. Also, I presented all my evidence, but I was always convicted till the Supreme Court decided to set me free.
Oh,
Yeah, and
certainly you have a lot of attention in those days.
yeah.
This one is where Holocaust survivor is accused of lying.
I mean, this is a main newspaper. Main newspaper in Canada.
Wow. Just passing. And I guess we have a lot of...
You can see I was a handsome-looking fellow with hair.
Okay, for the audience, they want to see you and you were
In my glory, yes.
in your glory. Ernst Zündel. Wow.
And then There's this one here that shows me with a helmet.
The helmet. Doesn't say the date, but you can find. Ah, yes, it's the Toronto Star, February 5, 85.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Have a lot of.
And this is interesting for maybe zooming in. The man on the right
Yes.
is the judge.
The judge. Let me show
first
the.
case, yeah.
So this man on the right is the judge.
No, this one here.
This one here, the prosecutor.
Yeah, and this is Alan Sheffman. He's from the B'nai B'rith Lodge. But this judge convicted me and did so many errors in law that the appeal court in Ontario gave me either a new trial or they were to drop the charges. So I got a new trial because he made over 100 errors in law, Judge Locke.
Judge Locke.
And this is me leaving the court after I was found guilty. And you can see
That's you in the middle here.
the reason for the helmet is because these people constantly hit me over the head with sticks. And so I need to protect my head. And this is the picture of my lawyer.
Lawyer's School Maverick. That's your book there, right? A copy of your book? No.
No. This is a book about on my trial.
On your trial.
Yeah, from a Jewish organization. Yeah, and we'll leave it at that.
Wow. Okay.
Good.
Well, Mr. Ernst, thank you so much for having us. Okay. And well, let's hope this Congress ends the best way. So thank you so
It's
much.
actually a very, very interesting Congress.
What's your impression on the Congress so far?
I have never been to such an intensive Congress. I mean, my wife and I, we were utterly exhausted when we came home last night. It's like overload
Yes.
of information. And boy, we sank into bed last night, but rich with new information. There's unbelievable quality of people here at that Congress, and I'm very glad that I was invited to it.
And you have a lot of fun, certainly, in here, right?
Oh, did you see that?
All the time. You don't have a time by yourself. So.
Yeah. Very good.
So, well, Ernst,
Okay.
thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
All right.
Okay.
La Guerra Invisible, Acción Psicológica y Revolución Cultural, en coautoría de Lucas Carena y Pablo Dávoli. El libro que revela las maniobras de manipulación psicológica y cultural. La Guerra Invisible, Acción Psicológica y Revolución Cultural, disponible en mercadolibre.com.ar. La Guerra Invisible, Acción Psicológica y Revolución Cultural.
Well, we're still with Mr. Zündel, and I'm replacing Cristian Rodrigo in this interview, but I had in my mind two questions. First, while you were in jail, we hear and we know that your wife has been a key factor in all your transition while you were in jail. Tell me a little bit about this, or your sensation, the love that has been involved in it.
Well, boy, now, have we got 3 hours? No, I'm just kidding. I was arrested in Tennessee in 2003. And I, of course, believed in the American dream and that I had constitutional protection and that nothing like that was going to happen to me in America. So it was a big surprise when it did happen, because we arrived in Tennessee when I married Ingrid. We arrived in Tennessee at the beginning of 2000. And well, first I lived in California, then we moved to Tennessee, and we set up our business there, a revisionist business and an art business, because I'm an artist. Bought a little gallery, was going to sell my paintings there. And the arrest came out of the clear blue sky, and suddenly Ingrid was stuck with looking after our affairs. And we were building, and we had pretty well exhausted our budget for building because we wanted to set up new business. And so there was a struggle for money to get lawyers. And Ingrid managed to raise the funds with paintings that I did in prison, little sketches. I'll show you, you can photograph those, that I made in prison. And we raised thousands and thousands of dollars thanks to Ingrid. I would make my paintings, send it to her. Ingrid would then copy it, put a little message with it, and send it to people as thank you notes for the people who helped us financially. And so she became, in a way, a genius in raising the funds and keeping our operation alive, because of course we had hoped that this mistake was going to be cleared up and I was going to be free soon. We didn't realize that forces that were behind, we at first just thought it was an error by some bureaucrat, but it turns out to be a policy of the United States to ship me out. And so Ingrid is the mainstay and has to this day basically controlled the finances that we could do our work continuously. Yeah.
There is a saying in Spanish that when there is a great man, behind him there is a great woman. Is that right?
Sometimes there's a great woman behind a man, you know. No, Ingrid is certainly very unique, and I'm very grateful to her.
Do you regret anything you have done?
Well, yeah, I have made some errors in my life, but politically, no. Politically, no. I think what I did, and I don't mean to brag, what I did was necessary, long overdue. It should have been done 30 years before that. And destiny must have chosen me for a reason. And I think I know the reason. Because I am controlled. You know, I'm self-controlled. I am not flying off the handle in anger and so on. And I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't booze, I have no whores in the background and so on. In order to do the job that was necessary, it took a sober, a very earnest person, and my name is Ernst, so therefore I was well chosen for the job. And I think the gods who assigned the roles here on earth chose me because they knew I had the capacity, I had the intellect, I had the linguistic skills, I had oratory skills, if I can say that, and I defended this cause very well.
And the moral strength.
Well, yeah, the strength of character that it took when the first bombs came and when the first fires came and when the beatings came and when the first jailings came, that took stamina, moral strength, yeah, that's what you could call it, yeah.
You know that today's world is quite complicated, and we see that each year, each decade that we are going or facing to the future, the truth is being subverted, suppressed. And in a way, new generations are being tricked by the truth, and they cannot reach the truth. They have been.
Yeah, I would say, thanks to the internet, there is and has been a tremendous change. a tremendous change, and I would say for the better. Now you could say the internet is full of pornography and violence and con games, but that's one side of the internet. But you have a choice as a person. You can go and watch pornography, or you can go and watch an interesting talk on history. So the choice is always the individuals, But I must tell you, I am impressed by many young people that I have met here, for instance, or that meet me in Germany and in Malaga in Spain when I go see Pedro in Barcelona and so on. There is a group of young people now growing up that I think they will do us honor. And they are very media savvy. They know how to use the new mediums. And therefore, I don't think there is cause for pessimism. Dr. Faurisson, the very famous French revisionist, said, "Oh, Ernst, I think it's going to be difficult for revisionists, the individual, they get bomb beaten and so on, but for revisionism, there is going to be a great future." And I think that's right.
So for the new generations, what will be your advice?
My advice is to always be alert, always be very carefully weighing what they hear, what they see, not to be easily fooled, to reflect on what they hear, and to always be moral, not to be able to be bought, not to be able to be tempted by riches. So it is a difficult road that they will have to hoe, to walk. But at the same time, the rewards are a culture and a civilization saved, liberated, and put on a new and better course. So I am 76. My life, chronologically speaking, I'm an old geezer,
You look less, eh?
But what I mean is,
much younger.
we do all what we do for the next generation. And I invest what I have learned in my life in that generation. All they need to do is be careful of drugs. Be careful how they handle money. Don't squander money. Don't be tempted by things that you shouldn't be tempted by. And this is a world full of temptation. Not to spend money on frivolous things, but to spend money on causes. Because like this conference here must have cost tens of thousands of dollars to put together. Now, somebody made the money, saved the money, is allocating the money. That is what I call, in an age of materialism, idealism is to deal carefully with money. This is a materialistic age, and the man who amounts to something is how to spend his money and his time wisely. And never, of course, goes without saying, as a white person, you do not go and commit crimes. You don't rob banks, you don't steal money, we are not famous for, we have as a people, we are ethical people. And so I said all years of my struggle, I said to my friends, do not hit back at the enemy. If they spit at you, you wipe it off. I do not want to see from our side violence on television that we struck some Jew or some other person. So control your tempers. Control what you say. Don't agitate. Tell the truth. Bear witness, like Christ said, we must bear witness. And ultimately what I have done all my life is only to bear witness to a truth as I know it now. Other people might not share in believing that it's a truth, but for me, I believe I found a truth and I found it worthy to be defended.
Well, without doubt, you are an example to follow. We know that in Argentina there is lots of people that admires you. All what you were being through. And we really are pleased to have this interview. and bring it to the Argentinians and the whole world that watches throughout internet, and you will be always an example, and we appreciate that.
And I would just answer with this final thing. All during the years of my imprisonment, I never once wavered that I thought it wasn't worthwhile. Now, of course, I think that there are people that are not worthy of the sacrifice. But what would the soldiers think who gave their life to people who are not worthy? If I look at our society, I mean, Americans can be included in that. I mean, German society also spits on the grave of their soldiers, and the Americans with all the Opfer, the kind of what is that in English? Opfer, Ingrid. Oh, she doesn't. Opfer. Anyways, well, with all the sacrifices that they make, and I mean the Americans are asked to sacrifice for criminal things. At least with the Germans, it was overwhelming opposition that we lost to. It's a more honorable thing than some other people faced. And I just say it must be our goal at all times to remain honorable and incorruptible.
You had the experience of war, and you have the experience of daily war, just to through the revisionism, tell the truth, and we all should fight for the truth. We went through Malvinas, which was a hard and a very important cause for us to fight for.
Who was the Spanish guy in charge of Italian background at the time of the Malvinas? Not Galtieri. What was his name?
Galtieri, General Galtieri.
Uh-huh. No, I mean I followed that with great interest. The Malvinas, you know. Apparently, they're recruiting troops or something for some new operation in the Malvinas. Is that true?
I guess the British do, because we haven't done it.
Apparently, there's a lot of oil there, in that flat bed towards the coast.
The British always put the steps where there is something to take.
That is great, yeah. I know that.
Mr. Zündel, thank you very much again. And this is from TLV1, television from Argentina, and we appreciate this interview. Thank you so much.
If I have any afterthoughts, you're still here with your camera. I'll seek you out and I'll show you some other things.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Very good.